So this presentation is on chapter 17 of Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 17 of Bhagavad Gita is titled The Divisions of Shraddha. So let's start with the definition. What do we mean by Shraddha? Shraddha is one of these Sanskrit words that is just a little tricky to render in English. It's often described as faith, but it is really much more than that. I've always found the process of trying to describe differences in attitude between East and West as interesting and sometimes very challenging. I know, many of you have been yoga practitioners or are yoga practitioners, and you may have encountered this in your own lives and in relating to people, and everyone has their own approach to it. But to me, one of the fundamental differences, one of the things that is very different is that when you say, I believe or I have faith, they say that, well, belief means you're having faith in something for which there is no proof. But really, that is not what the Sanskrit word Shraddha refers to. Sanskrit word Shraddha is referring to, I would say, it's the investment of our entire being. It's our attitude. And really that term applies if you look at people who are significant religious figures. You would say that they have Shraddha, someone who is willing to sacrifice everything. They're completely invested in what they're doing, and they don't have any shred of any doubt. To give one example, you could say that, Shraddha is also something that we do in relation to our raising children, for example. That is also an activity where we are very fully invested, and we judge other people. We say whether someone's being a good parent or a bad parent or simply indifferent. So Shraddha is a very big concept. It's not really just, if we say that this is a chapter of Bhagavad Gita about divisions of faith, it's really talking about our attitude and our investment of our being. And Shraddha applies to everything we do in life. That is really the point of chapter 17. And this describes how the three gunas color our Shraddha differently in different areas of our lives. So the introduction, Krishna says, Aharas tvapi sarvasya trividha bhavati priyaha yagyas tapas tata danam tesham bhedamidam srinu. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, he's saying that there are three types of food according to the persons they appeal to. So right off the bat, he's explaining, when we talk about sattvic ahara, we are talking about the food that appeals to sattvic persons. And similarly, there are three types of sacrifice and three types of charity. So in this chapter, and this is really part of chapter 17, the remainder does describe Shraddha specifically, and it also describes the results of Shraddha and of the different types of activities here. Here we're just going to focus, because what's really relevant for you as Ayurvedic practitioners is to consider the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and how these three gunas color the mind, how they color our activities, how they color our speech. So that's really what is being discussed in this part. So this is verse 7 of chapter 17. You may not read the Devanagari here, but you can see the number here. The number in Roman numerals is is well, we call them Arabic numerals, but they actually originally came from Sanskrit. So 17.7, it's chapter 17, verse 7. So that's where we're starting from. So first, ahara, or food in sattva. Ayu sattva balarogyam balarogya sukha priti vivardhanaha rasya snigdha stira hridya ahara sattvika priyaha. Food that is in sattva gun, or food that is dear to those who are in sattva gun, prolongs life. So ayu, it prolongs life. It increases the duration of life. If we eat sattvic food, it will actually prolong life. What are some examples of sattvic things? Having ghee. Now, this seems a little counterintuitive to the Western mindset, because people think, oh, I want to be skinny, I want to be ripped, I want to have zero body fat. But actually, Ayurveda says that having ghee is going to boost your immunity, and a healthy person is not going to have hollow cheekbones. Their face is going to be a little more full. They're not going to be obese or overweight, but they're not going to be what we would call skinny necessarily. So sattvic food will prolong life. And there have been studies also that have kind of reversed the course on when Western nutrition was recommending be as skinny as possible. And now they're saying, well, actually, if you are too skinny, then your immunity may not be as good. So sattvic food, also sattva, it nourishes our existence. Bala, arogya, it gives strength, bala, and arogya, or immunity. Sukha priti vivardhana, it increases happiness and satisfaction. So sattvic food will give strength, it will give immunity, it will give happiness, it will give satisfaction. And it is rasya. Rasya means it is full of taste. It is full of taste. And snigdha, it is rich. It's not, something that's tasteless and it is necessarily fat-free. It has some ghee in it. It will be snigdha. Stira hridya ahara sattvika priyaha. It's tasty, it's rich, it's satisfying. These are the qualities of sattvika ahara, or food which is dear to those who are in sattva gun. Ahara in rajas. So what are the properties of food that is dear to those in Rajagun? Katvamla lavanatyushna tikshna ruksha vidahinaha ahara rajasam samsyeshta dukkha shokamaya pradaha. So food in Rajagun will be excessively sour, katu, pungent, amla, astringent, salty, lavana, hot, atyushna, sharp, tikshna, ruksha, rough, vidahinaha. It will produce burning sensations, and it will produce dukkha shokamaya prada. It produces misery and distress. So this is not just describing, it sounds like, if you don't really like spicy food, it sounds like how you might feel eating something that's really too salty and really too hot, and then you get heartburn after it. That's kind of the obvious interpretation of this. One thing, when I learned to cook, I learned to cook according to Ayurvedic principles. I learned to cook according to taste and to make things that are freshly prepared and hygienic and prepared with good consciousness. But we would also use red chilies and green chilies and other things. Of course, black pepper, spices, cinnamon, cumin, coriander, nutmeg, cloves, hing, turmeric, a lot of fresh ginger root, coriander powder. You know, this is basically what I grew up learning how to cook. But you can, and some things we make very hot, like we might make some condiments, we might make chutneys that are very hot, because you can have a little bit of a hot chutney with a large plate of rice, and that's a way of balancing and adding some heat to something. When we show people how to do cooking for Ayurveda, we usually will just use black pepper, because actually black pepper has been around for a very long time. One thing that I noticed with black pepper, as opposed to using red chilies and green chilies, is that it gives a more even type of heat. And if you use more black pepper, you will add more heat. So adding black pepper and ginger in cooking is going to actually give you a pretty good amount of heat. But using extremely high levels of heat, and some people will do this for a thrill, you know, they'll go, hey, I went and had a dish at this restaurant that uses ghost pepper, or I had something that uses, you know, chili oil extract. Because there is a certain release of endorphins that you get if you have something that's really, really, really hot. But you also get a release of endorphins if you hit yourself on the finger with a hammer. So I really would not recommend either of those. And this is what Krishna is really saying in the Gita, is that if you are going for a thrill by having things that are in excess, and when we talk about excessively salty, you know, we talk about cooking, and in cooking, you shouldn't really taste the salt. But if you don't use enough salt, things will taste kind of watery and very bland and tasteless. Salt is a taste enabler. And if you don't use any salt, or you use too little salt, you will not get the taste. If there's too much, things taste salty, and that is not good. That will tend to dehydrate us. It is not good. It will disturb our balance, our proper balance of doshas. So, you know, the key here is that all these things that are in excess, these are all rajasic, and it will produce burning sensations. It will produce misery and distress. So this is not just talking about getting heartburn because I had something that was too hot. Or the other thing is, you know, when you get piles or hemorrhoids, which will happen if you eat things that are too hot over a long period of time. And of course, those, if you have them, they are no joke. They are extremely painful, and it's a pain that comes back to you every time you're trying to have a bowel movement, especially if you haven't been drinking enough water and the stools get hard. Having piles is extremely painful. So, but we're not just talking about that type of pain. We're also talking about if you are having a rajasic ahara and you are eating things that are very much in rajogun, in the mode of passion, it is going to be imbalancing. It is going to produce amaya. It is going to produce disease imbalance. And this is really the type of distress that you're going to actually have more of. Finally, ahara in tamogun. What are the properties of ahara in tamogun? Yatayamam, something that is cooked more than 3 hours before being eaten. Yama is a measure of time. It's a division of the day. So about 1/4 of a day or 1/4 of a night is a yama. That's about 3 hours. Half of a yama is a muhurta. So you can divide the day into 8 parts and the night into 8 parts. That's just an old way of managing time. But basically, yatayama means that it has gone more than 3 hours. So ideally, and you've heard this from us before many times, the ideal way to have things is things are cooked freshly, and while it's still warm, we don't have to reheat it or anything. We have it, and that's a good meal. That's going to be a proper and nourishing meal. And as soon as things have sat for a long time, even if they get frozen, even if they get refrigerated and vacuum sealed and all the other things that we do to extend the life, the sattvic quality, even of well-prepared sattvic food, is going down. It is declining. It doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, yeah, we have to throw everything out, but it's kind of like, here's when things have been cooked, and here's the 3-hour mark. My mouse is not really behaving. Here's the nutritional value when it's first cooked, and then it starts to decline, and then it starts to drop a bit more. And then after, say, a day or so, if it's not done something to preserve it, it's becoming less and less. It will ferment or become rotten, and then of course it becomes, at some point, completely, there's no point in having that. What's going to happen if we have tamasic ahar? It is going to produce ama. So, moving along. Gata rasam, it's tasteless, means there is no ras. Puti is foul. Pariyushitam, rotten. Uchishtam api, when we have the remnants of others, that is also considered tamasic, what someone has eaten and then they've partly eaten it and we eat their remnants. Now there's a spiritual tradition that says, eating remnants of very elevated spiritual personalities is beneficial. But this is talking about just remnants of ordinary people. Amidya, unclean. What are examples of unclean food? Food that is prepared in an unhygienic environment, food that uses unclean ingredients. For example, things that are produced from things like eggs, for example. Eggs would be considered tamasic. They would be considered unclean from the strict viewpoint of yoga practice. Even though there is no life that's being taken for the egg, still it would be considered unclean. So these are all descriptions of tamasic ahara. So now we move on to talk about yajna. What do we mean by yajna? So yajna can be translated as sacrifice. When we talk about shraddha as a kind of investment of our being, and sacrifice when we are offering something of ourselves, when we are, literally there is a type of sacrifice called agnihotram. Agnihotram is a fire ceremony. I'll write it out here. So agnihotram is a fire ceremony where a sacred fire is established, and it is done with mantras, and offerings are made into the fire. It is a way of purifying the environment. If we are, let's say, doing a big auspicious project, like let's say we're going to do construction of a new house or a new building, it's very traditional to do an agnihotra, to do a fire sacrifice, and it produces a type of cleansing of the environment, a cleansing of the properties of the area in which we are doing it, and we are also inviting blessings of devas. or divine beings. So sacrifice is not just, this type of sacrifice of doing fire ceremony. We're talking also in general about the sacrifice that we do, things that we do as a sacrifice when we are offering results of something that we're doing. That is also a type of sacrifice. Krishna talks about sacrifice, talks about yajna quite a lot in Bhagavad Gita. He talks about yajna in the context of yoga practice. So now there is yajna that is offering things. For example, even if someone is chanting a mantra, if someone is doing a mantra, that is called a japa yajna. Krishna says in the 11th chapter, Yajnanam Japa Yogyosmi. Of all sacrifices, I am Japa Yajna. So it is not just doing the fire ceremony. There are many types of sacrifice that can be done. Now, talking in general about sacrifice, there is sacrifice that's done in Sattva Gun. In Sattva Gun, it is apalakankshi bir yagyo vidhi drishta cha ya ijjate yashtavyam eveti manaha samadhaya sa sattvakaha. So sacrifice which is done in Sattva Gun is done without attachment to the result, meaning it is done as a matter of duty or doing it because it is the right thing to do. Now, when we put it this way, you see how this really applies to doing things. For example, if I do something because it's the right thing to do, and this doesn't just apply to sacrifice, it applies to, doing things in day-to-day life. If I am doing it because it's the right thing to do, that is a more sattvic approach to life in general. Also, sattvic yajna is done observing proper rules and regulations, vididrishta. I am not cheating. I'm doing things properly. I'm following rules and regulations. This applies in doing a sacrifice like a fire ceremony. It applies also in doing things like, say, I'm starting a business. I'm just going to do things properly. I'm not going to try to cheat and cut corners and I'm going to do a big building project and I'm going to build something and I'm going to get people to work for me as contractors, and then I have no intention of paying them. I'll pay them half and then tell them they can come sue me later. That's the opposite of the sattvic way of doing something. So you can see how the three gunas translate into various areas of life. Observing proper rules and regulations, that is sattvic. And when things are done with proper attention and attitude, with full attention, samadhaya, mana samadhaya. So I'm giving my attention to it. I'm not doing it indifferently. I'm doing it with full attention. And I'm doing it with attention and intention, meaning I am doing something and I have given thought to the purpose that I want to accomplish, and I'm doing it with the respect of giving my full attention. Okay, so that is how yajna is done in Sattva Gun. Yajna in Rajogun. What are the properties of yajna in Rajogun? It is abhisandhaya tu phalam dambhartam apichaiva yat ijjate bharata sreshta tam yagyam vidhi rajasam. Understand that sacrifice is done in Rajogun when it's only done with a specific goal in mind. What am I going to get out of it? I'm only doing this to get the result, to get the goal, not for any other reason. Or it's done pretentiously, dambhartam, or for show. I'm just putting on a big show so other people will say, oh, look at that person. That person is doing a sacrifice. They are very proper, and they are doing things. They're doing, such a nice thing. That's called doing things for show. And that's very much in the mode of passion. People who are in the mode of passion are always, in Rajagun, are always looking at, what will other people think of me? What's the appearance? I want to make other people think that I'm doing something proper, even when I'm not. But appearances are everything. That's a very Rajasic attitude. You think about that, you can see how this applies to everyday life. So, what is yagya in Tamogun? Vidihinam asrishtanam mantrahinam adakshanam shraddhavidahito vidahitam yagyam tamasam parichakshate. So sacrifice performed in Tamogun is done without any observation of rules. There's no observance of rules. Vidihinam, it's devoid of rules of doing things properly. Asrishtanam, it's done without distributing food. Now this is actually a very important point. And in we talk sometimes in Ayurveda about the importance of respecting food and how important digestion is. And there is even a mantra that can be recited for digestion that is, saying that Jataragni, the fire in the stomach, right? So that Jataragni is one of the types of Agni. And that Jataragni is a manifestation of the divine, and we are requesting that Jataragni should burn and consume our food completely, because what happens to food that is not consumed properly? It becomes what? What's the word I'm looking for? Sanskrit word for food that is not digested. Ama, yes, that's correct. Yes. And we want that Jataragni to do a complete transformation of our food. Now, what's the digression here? Why are we talking about yagya and distributing food? Because food grains are considered to be a gift from God. They're considered to be a blessing. And if someone is going to do a yagya, there's always distribution of food that's done. It's considered a part of yagya that there should be food should be offered, and then it should be distributed, and people should be fed. So in old times, when kings and queens would perform sacrifice, they would feed everyone in the city. They would give people clothes. They would give people every kind of necessity of life that they needed. And this was a very important part of doing any type of sacrifice, because it is a way of having respect for other beings and for other humans. This was all very much a part of Vedic life. So if a sacrifice is done without distribution of food, that is called a tamasic sacrifice, because it is considered such a must, such an important thing, that there should be distribution of blessed food in a yagya, done without mantras and done without giving any charity or gift to the priest. So typically if there is a ceremony that's done, it should be done with respect. One may invite someone to do it, and then they should be given something. They may be given clothes. They may be given some food, grains, a sack of rice, or something like that. So yeah, in the modern world, sacrifice is doing something for social welfare. There has never been any concept of doing yagya or sacrifice without also doing something for social welfare. It is also a very good means of eradicating karma. Sometimes there are karmic issues that we run into in consulting with people, and we might recommend that they do a yajna. And you can go to, there are a lot of Hindu temples, and they have, the priests there will, do a yajna on your behalf for a specific thing, for Jyotish, and then they should be given something, they should be given a donation, and there should be some distribution of food. It's very important. Otherwise, it's not a yajna. And also, if yajna is done without any faith, this is also tamasic. Now, again, take yajna, apply it to social welfare work, okay? So someone has done something as an anonymous donor. They have tried to establish service, and they're not looking to claim credit for it. Okay, that is more sattvic. Someone has tried to make their name really big, and they're not really doing much, but it's mostly just for show. That's very rajasic. Someone is doing something negligently, and they don't follow rules, and they're really just doing it as a front for money laundering or something. That's very tamasic. You get the idea. So now let's talk about austerity or tapasya. So there were three things. There is food, ahara, which we covered, and there's yajna, and then there is tapasya, and also charity or dana. So first, let's talk about what are the definitions. So this is interesting. In the 17th chapter of the Gita, Sri Krishna first describes what tapasya means. What are the different types of tapasya? And then goes on and describes them according to the three gunas. Deva dvija guru pragya pujanam shauchamarjavam brahmacharyam ahimsacha shariram tapa uchyate. So these are austerities of the body. Giving respect to devas, the twice-born, gurus or preceptors, and elders. Cleanliness, shaucham. Remaining equipoised, arjavam, means that we don't become, allow ourselves to become agitated. That is called an austerity of the body. Brahmacharyam, observing celibacy, meaning that we are not overindulging in sex more than is necessary. That is considered, according to Ayurveda, that is considered one of the pillars of health. So, of course, some people take brahmacharya to the full degree of, living the fully celibate life, but it also means not overindulging, because that is considered to be bad for health, as well as it is an austerity to observe. Not, to do it artificially so that someone is disturbed by not doing it and only thinking about the thing that they're not doing, or, trying to impose it on others. Like, you hear the stories about the, pregnant teen and the people in the hospital say to the parents, could we tell her about birth control? No, she's just going to be celibate. And then, and then after her second pregnancy, they said, okay, all right, you can tell her now. And unfortunately, that's just the idea that some people have. But this is, when we talk about it in the context of Ayurveda, we are simply saying, that overindulgence is not going to be really great. Ahimsa, or practicing nonviolence, this is also an austerity of the body. If you are doing things to maintain the body that involve violence to other beings, that is something that one can give up, and that one is on the yoga path, which of course is the focus of Bhagavad Gita. Ahimsa is really a must. If someone is aspiring to practice yoga, you have to give up violence to other beings, and that's not just violence to other humans, it also means violence to animals. So austerity of the body and austerity of speech. So what do we mean by austerity of speech? Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vangmayam tapa uchyate. So anudvegakaram vakyam, speaking the truth. Satyam is truth. How to speak the truth in a way that does not disturb others. You know, this is actually very difficult. We should be truthful, but it's also possible to be truthful and do it in a way that is disturbs. Specifically, the word is anudvegakaram, which does not disturb. Sometimes people are going to be disturbed by what you say if you speak the truth. You know, sometimes you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And how to be tactful sometimes, there's just no way to be tactful. There is sometimes more harm that's done in trying to avoid being truthful than in speaking the truth. But there is sometimes a way that we can get the message across without unnecessarily offending. You know, for example, you know, if someone is asking us our opinion, well, what did you think of this piece that I wrote? And I say, well, I thought it was a pile of crap, and I think you should just give up writing because you really are not any good at it. That's really, it's harsh and it's unnecessary and it's not helping them at all. I could say, on the other hand, well, as a reader, I found that your story was not really that compelling. You started out with a long narrative about how you felt, and I thought that it would have drawn me in more as a reader if you did this. So I just didn't really find it that compelling, honestly. So, you know, I've said the same thing essentially, but I've said it in a little bit more tactful way, and hopefully a way that is not as disturbing. But, you know, hey, we've all known people that if you gave them that kind of feedback, they're going to blow up. They're going to scream and throw stuff at you and stomp out. And, but, you know, that's not the standard by which you should judge things. You know, it's always best to speak the truth. Speaking lies that are comforting is really not advocated. Krishna is not advocating speak comforting lies. Speak the truth, but do it in a way that's not unnecessarily disturbing. Or better to not say anything if you can't. You know, if you can't say something that's going to be not disturbing. Speak pleasingly. Priyahitam chayat. That's an austerity of speech. There is no need to speak harshly, to just make noise, to just shout and speak harshly and to use a lot of swear words just because I can. Okay, yes, I also have been guilty on many occasions of swearing. I'm not going to deny that. It's sometimes a good outlet. But, you know, to speak, to observe austerity of speech, it would be to speak pleasingly, to speak in a way that is pleasant, and that when others listen to you, they feel enlightened. They feel that they've gotten something out of it. They feel that you're interested and engaged in the topic. Another austerity of speech is swadhyayabhyasanam. This is a very interesting one because it's saying that if we do some study, if we have actually learned something and we have done our proper duties, then the things that we speak after having studied, after having learned something, and after having done our proper duties, this is much more meaningful. That's an austerity of speech. I'm not just going to spout opinion just because I feel like I have to open my mouth and say something. I'm going to talk about something where I actually know. I might have an opinion about things where I haven't studied and I haven't, done a lot in that area. Like my son will want to ask me something about quantum physics, and I'll have to preface that with, well, I really don't know much about quantum physics, but I can tell you this. So it's an austerity of speech. I'm not going to try to pretend, oh yeah, I can tell you everything about it because I'm an expert, when I'm not really an expert. So that is swadhyaya abhyasanam, that I have first, I'm speaking about the things in which I actually know something. So that is an austerity of speech. Finally, austerity of mind. So what is austerity of mind? Manaprasada saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava samshuddhir ityetat tapo manasamuchyate. To practice self-satisfaction, manaprasada. This is such a thing, it's hard to overemphasize. I tell my kids, if you're not satisfied with a little, you're not going to be satisfied with a lot. It's a fact. If we cannot be satisfied with what we have, just having more doesn't produce more satisfaction, because self-satisfaction is something that we have in our mind, in our hearts. Saumyatvam, peacefulness, to be peaceful. This is also an austerity of mind. Maunam means silence. I didn't put that in here. Silence means to not just speak for the sake of making noise. It means that I remain thoughtful, and I don't have to be talking all the time. I can also be thinking. So maunam is an austerity of mind. Atma vinigraha, to practice self-control, or to remain situated in oneself. Self-control means that I can choose how I behave. I can have some control over my behavior. That is an austerity of the mind. If our mind is disturbed, then it's very hard to control our behavior, obviously. And bhava samshuddhi, to practice purity of thought, to think about this. We can choose what to think about. And we talked about early on in the Ayurveda and the mind, we talked about this cycle of thinking, feeling, and willing. You think about something, you start to develop feelings about it, then you develop the will to action. But if you can choose the things that you think about, or if you know that I start thinking about something, I'm going to go down a certain path. And then you say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to go down that path. I'm going to choose to think about something else. That is part of austerity of mind. It's practicing purity of thought by choosing our objects of focus. And that is that's as far as we have on the presentation. I'll speak a little bit more, and then we can take questions, because I didn't cover the 3 divisions of charity and of so after defining austerity of speech, austerity of body, austerity of mind, then Krishna describes tapasya in the 3 gunas. But the important part is charity. So charity which is done without thought of return, and according to time, place, and the recipient, that is, and which is done with respect, that is sattvic charity. Rajasic charity is done for gain or for increasing my prestige, and it is always done with a goal in mind. And tamasic charity is done without consideration of the time, place, and recipient, and it is done disrespectfully or negligently. So these are the three divisions of charity. So that is really the summary of the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita in terms of the relevant parts. So, these are all things to think about. This is all food for thought in terms of understanding the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, how they affect the mind, and how this translates into action as well. There we go. So if there are no other questions, then we will stop there. I'm going to just pause the recording and see if there's any other thing that we have going on. All right, well, I guess that's it. So we don't have any questions, and we will end there. Thank you very much. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope this has given you some food for thought. And you can do some more reading on your own on the Bhagavad Gita and Three Gunas. So thank you very much.